If you'd like to support this channel, please consider purchasing a copy of my book, Captain Steele and Other Stories, on Amazon, especially if you are a fan of speculative fiction. Edgar Allan Poe famously broke down horror fiction into two categories in his book Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque, first published in the year 1840. Poe's definitions of the terms were that grotesque horror dealt with something physically horrifying, like the horror a man would experience if he were melting, or if he looked into a mirror and saw himself transforming into a werewolf. Grotesque horror is perhaps the easiest of the two to explain, as it is largely self-evident. Arabesque horror, in contrast, dealt with something totally intangible and was thus a bit more challenging to explain. Probably the best example I can think of when it comes to arabesque horror is the Guy de Maupassant short story, The Necklace. It tells the story of a middle-class couple living in France in the 1870s who borrow a diamond necklace from their wealthier friends for the wife to wear at a high society ball, where they hope to gain societal influence. The couple promptly loses the necklace at the end of the evening. With their hats in their hands, they secretly go to a local jeweler and buy an identical diamond necklace, which wipes out their savings and puts them under enormous debt, so they can remain in the good graces of the wealthy friends who lent them the first necklace. The couple spend the next 10 years living in abject poverty while paying off this enormous debt and lose whatever high society connections they were starting to build in the process. Then, one day while in the park, the wife sees her wealthy former lady friend who lent her the necklace a decade before. Her lady friend doesn't recognize her anymore after years of toiling work have taken their toll on her once beautiful appearance. She confesses that she had lost the necklace at that party 10 years ago and tells her what she and her husband had to go through in order to replace it. Her lady friend then reveals to her that the necklace she had originally lent them had fake diamonds in it and wasn't worth very much at all, before dismissively walking away from her. The horror that the wife and the reader feel is what Poe meant by arabesque. It is very difficult to categorize the kind of horror, either grotesque or arabesque, one feels after watching the Twilight Zone episode, Number 12 Looks Just Like You. Based on the Charles Beaumont short story, The Beautiful People, this is one of the very best episodes the original Twilight Zone ever produced, but isn't often considered in the same lofty tier as episodes as, say, The Eye of the Beholder, an episode with similar themes. It does, however, have a rather chilling ending, but not a twist ending like the more fondly remembered episodes of the series. The story opens with a mother and daughter relaxing in their living room. The mother, Lana, is wearing quasi-futuristic attire, an outfit that also includes, among other things, a name tag. She's seen admiring a display hovering high above them featuring two female models. One is labeled 12 and the other is labeled 8. The one labeled 12 looks identical to Lana. Lana's daughter, Marilyn, is totally ignoring the display and is instead giving her attention to a large scrapbook. Marilyn doesn't seem to be interested in the images above them, much to the confusion of her mother. Through dialogue, we learn that Marilyn has reached the age in their society when she gets to pick a pattern for her, quote, transformation. Lana doesn't understand why Marilyn is so disinterested in the selection process and exclaims that the transformation is the best thing that could possibly happen to a person. Marilyn should be tremendously excited, according to her mother, but isn't. Marilyn asks her mother if she absolutely has to go through with the transformation or if she could wait a while, at the very least, to which her mother responds by calling her nervous and suggests that they both have a glass of something called instant smile. Lana presses a button and calls forth a servant. The servant, like Lana, is model number 12 and is played by the same actress. The servant acts much like an older woman. Lana scorns the servant for not calling her Lana and refers to her as you people, despite the servant's name, Grace, appearing on her quasi-futuristic maid's outfit. Grace receives instructions to prepare 2 glasses of instant smile from Lana and departs. Lana then returns to fawning over the images floating above them. She rhetorically asks her daughter, "What's so terrible about being beautiful? After all, isn't everybody?" Rod Serling then enters and gives his introduction. Given the chance, what young girl wouldn't happily exchange a plain face for a lovely one? What girl could refuse the opportunity to be beautiful? For want of a better estimate, let's call it the year 2000. At any rate, imagine a time in the future where science has developed the means of giving everyone the face and body he dreams of. It may not happen tomorrow, but it happens now, in the Twilight Zone. We come back from commercial break to find that Marilyn is being paid a visit by her uncle Rick, a man who also has the kind of mid-century movie star good looks as her mother. Rick has come at the behest of her mother to find out why she has expressed an interest in not going through with the transformation. Through this discussion, we learn that Marilyn's father had the same pattern as Rick, number 17, and that this has been the most popular men's pattern for the last 20 years. Marilyn asks Rick if being just like everybody is the same as being like nobody, and he responds by asking her where she's been hearing all of these, quote, radical ideas. Marilyn tells Rick that she and her father used to have deep conversations about things, not just frivolities like electronic baseball or super soccer or about clothes and hair. Rick then asks her, "Well, is that bad, liking sports, buying clothes?" She says no, but that there has to be more to life than that. Rick dismisses her by telling her she just needs a nice cup of instant smile. Marilyn tells him that she doesn't want to smile and that she sometimes wants to cry or frown, and then asks him rhetorically, "Don't you understand?" He puts his hand on her shoulders and, in a pleasant voice, tells her that she really is a very sick girl. Later, Marilyn is paid another visit, this time by her best friend Valerie, who has already gone through her transformation and bears the likeness of pattern number 8, which is basically a blonde bombshell pattern in the vein of Norma Jean Baker, aka Marilyn Monroe. Val tells Marilyn that the transformation doesn't hurt and that when they did hers, she didn't feel a thing. Val then asks Marilyn if she likes the way she looks now, and Marilyn tells her that she likes her, and that she liked her before the transformation too. Val compares the transformation to going to the salon and getting a new hairstyle. It just makes you look better. Marilyn then tries to tell Val that it's wrong to make people look like so many other people. "How will you know me? How will anyone know me?" Marilyn asks. Val just doesn't know how to process any of this and doesn't respond. The next day, Marilyn's mother takes her to the hospital to talk to someone about the transformation. When they walk in, Dr. Rex openly mocks her current appearance, citing her violent skin eruptions, her misshapen form, and awkward posture. He then concludes that Marilyn is tired of being a monster and wants to know why she has to wait until she turns 19 before she can be transformed. Marilyn then corrects the record and tells the doctor that she doesn't want to go through with the transformation. The doctor is perplexed by this and assures Marilyn that not only is the process 100% safe, but that it's also become a societal coming-of-age milestone, a sign of maturity. Marilyn sums up the transformation as simply making her look like everyone else. The doctor then tells her that the transformation is about more than aesthetics, and that it plays a very important role in psychological development. He puts a helmet on her connected to a computer on a wall so that they can determine what her mental health status is. He then reads the microfilm printout results from the computer and asks Lana some questions about Marilyn's father. We learn that Marilyn's father was in the rocket service and died in something called the Ganymede incident 5 years earlier, and that her father resisted transformation at first, but eventually chose pattern 17. The doctor then looks at the microfilm readout from the computer and tells her that her intelligence rating is quite high, her social adaptability is good, and her powers of reasoning are also quite high. Marilyn then demands to know if those ratings are correct, why they are going to make her go through with the transformation and not let her make up her own mind. The doctor then assures her that no one has ever been forced to take the transformation if they didn't want it, to which she breathes a sigh of relief. But then he adds, You see, the problem is simply to discover why you don't want it, and to make the necessary correction. After commercial break, Marilyn is taken through the labyrinthian halls of the windowless hospital to the office of Professor Sigmund Frenz, also a pattern 17 man, but sporting a German accent. He listens to Marilyn's plight. Sig tells her that the transformation, in addition to all we've learned up until this point in the story, also prolongs human life by a factor of 2 to 3 and makes people immune to disease. He then asks her if this is a good thing, and she says that it is, and then asks if they could do that without changing her physical appearance. Sig balks at this, laughing at the idea of only getting a portion of the transformation. She then asks Sig if he has ever read Shakespeare, Keats, or Shelley, and suddenly his demeanor changes to cold seriousness as he tells her those books were banned years ago. She then mentions the works of Dostoevsky and tells him that he was epileptic. He was ugly and deformed, but yet he wrote about beauty. She tells him that these men wrote about the dignity of the individual human spirit. Sig stops her by saying that referencing, quote, smut into the interview will not help her case, and that for the time being she will have to remain at the hospital and will not be permitted to go home. Later, Marilyn is paid a visit in her hospital cell by her mother and Val. Marilyn tells her mother that they don't care about whether or not everybody is beautiful. They just want everybody to be the same. Lana leaves, not able to comprehend what she's hearing, and Val stays behind. Val then reveals some more secrets and details about the society they live in, exclaiming that she shouldn't concern herself with the ideas of her father because he's dead.
I've been thinking about what you said. I mean, about what your father said, and... Well, I don't see why you're so concerned about him. He's dead. Surely you've had other fathers. My mother's been married 11 times, and... Personally, I've liked the stepfathers better anyway.
Valerie, please don't.
Look, everybody marries everybody these days.
Valerie, stop.
I just don't see how anybody can stay married to the same husband for 100 years. And besides, I've heard that your father was pretty dull.
Valerie, stop it! Stop talking about my father. Can't any of you understand? I loved him. I cared about him. He was good and he was kind and he cared about me. Not what I wore, not the way I looked, but what I thought, what I felt. And what's more important, he cared about himself and his dignity as a human being. Valerie, he didn't die in the Ganymede incident. My father killed himself because when they took away his identity, he had no reason to go on living.
Val is incapable of processing anything that Marilyn has told her and focuses solely on Marilyn's tone of voice. The substance of what was just told to her is completely lost on her. When Marilyn asks Val if she feels anything at all, Val slips back into Pollyanna mode.
I just don't understand you, Marilyn.
Valerie, can't you feel anything?
Well, of course, silly. I feel good. I always feel good. Life is pretty, life is fun. I am all and all is one.
Marilyn is left sobbing as she now realizes that she is totally alone, as no one in the hospital is capable of understanding her or her concerns. Later, she attempts to escape, and we can see that many of the hospital personnel are doing their tasks in a sort of euphoric trance. Eventually, Marilyn hides in one of the rooms, and this room turns out to be one of the transformation rooms. The personnel grab her and assign her number 8, because the pattern, as we've learned, isn't what it's really all about. The different patterns are merely there to provide the illusion of choice. The story ends with the introduction of the new and improved Marilyn.
Mother! Val! Look at me! What do you think?
You're beautiful, Marilyn. Just beautiful.
And the nicest part of all, Val, I look just like you.
While she still seems to have old Marilyn's voice, it clearly isn't her. There's nothing left of the beautiful, spirited young lady we've got to know during the story. She's been replaced by a vapid, grinning spokesmodel of limited dimensions, just like everybody else. I'll let Rod Serling sum things up. Portrait of a young lady in love. With herself. Improbable? Perhaps. But in an age of plastic surgery, bodybuilding, and an infinity of cosmetics, let us hesitate to say impossible. These and other strange blessings may be waiting in the future, which, after all, is the Twilight Zone. Original Marilyn was played by Colin Wilcox, who many will recognize from the 1962 classic To Kill a Mockingbird, in which she played the part of Mayella Ewell, a young woman who falsely accused Tom Robinson of rape. Wilcox is intentionally lit in an unattractive way throughout most of the story, in contrast to the other actors in the piece. It is only at the end, while Marilyn is trying to escape, that they light her in an attractive way and adjust her makeup slightly, subtly indicating, by that time in the story, that she's truly the most beautiful person in the story. Model number 8 characters were played by actress and teen spokesmodel Pam Austin. Model number 12 characters were played by Susie Parker, who in 1956 was the highest paid model in the world, earning close to $1 million a year adjusting for inflation. Model number 17 characters were played by actor Richard Long, who starred in several ABC television shows in the 1960s, including 77 Sunset Strip. As mentioned, the original short story was called The Beautiful People and was written by Charles Beaumont, who I covered in my review of another Twilight Zone episode here on YouTube called The Howling Man. There are some differences between the original short story and the episode, but not many. The biggest difference in the short story is perhaps the suggestion of what actually happens to the old you during the so-called transformation process. You can find The Beautiful People online, and I suggest anyone who is curious to go ahead and read it. Just use your search engine skills and you'll find it rather quickly. Despite Rod Serling rather hilariously suggesting that this episode could take place in the year 2000, this episode does have a lot to say about where we are and where we are headed in present year. One of the most persistent adversaries in the original Twilight Zone show was an entity referred to simply as the State. Episodes like this one, Eye of the Beholder, and The Obsolete Man, dealt with people having to contend with this unseen yet pervasive enemy. Of course, there are some people out there who will dismiss out of hand the very notion of a villain called the State as flippant and childish fantasy. I mean, the idea of a government forcing people through laws, regulations, and social pressure to undergo a medical procedure? That's just crazy talk, right? That couldn't happen, especially in the United States. But I digress. The moment at the end when the new Marilyn is revealed, she does something that was largely unheard of in early television dramas. She looks directly at the camera, at you, and with a fake smile and a phony Pollyanna-mimicking look in her eyes. She's a perpetually happy automaton now who will never again be concerned with abstract concepts like the individual human spirit. She'll only ever be concerned with frivolities and trivial matters, and she'll do this from within a form that is indistinguishable from a high percentage of other females in her society. Is this grotesque horror or arabesque horror? I can't tell you. Like all good television, it leaves that for the viewer to ponder. Thanks for watching.